The grand rotunda of the Valeri consensus was not merely a room. It was a testament to the concept of eternity, a hollowed-out geode suspended in the gravitational null zone of a binary star system, where the walls shimmered with the crystalline residue of eons past. The light here was never static. It shifted with the orbital dance of the twin suns outside, bathing the assembled delegates in hues of deep violet and scorching amber, a visual rhythm that had dictated the flow of galactic politics for 10,000 cycles. Yet today, the light felt cold, the amber casting long, predatory shadows that seemed to claw at the dais where the High Exarch sat. The air, usually perfumed with the scent of ozone and crushed petals from the garden worlds, was thick with the copper tang of fear, a pheromonal distress signal radiating from a dozen different species, mixing into a suffocating smog of anxiety. High Exarch Thalos, a being of towering height whose carapace gleamed with the iridescence of polished oil, rested his heavy manipulator limbs upon the obsidian table, his compound eyes fracturing the image of the council into 1,000 tiny shards of panic. He did not speak immediately. Silence was a weapon in the consensus, a way to measure the resolve of one's peers, but today the silence was not a weapon. It was a shroud. The galaxy was dying, piece by piece, system by system, devoured by an encroachment that defied the laws of physics, a phenomenon the scientists had sterilized with the name, the discordance, but which the soldiers simply called the end. The reports from the rim sectors are conclusive, Thalos finally intoned, his voice a subsonic rumble that vibrated in the chest cavities of the mammalian delegates and resonated against the exoskeletons of the insectoid representatives. The shielding arrays of the Cathar hegemony have failed. The star of the Antares cluster has been extinguished, not gone supernova, not collapsed into a singularity, simply extinguished, erased. The discordance consumes the energy, the matter, and the very history of what it touches. He paused, letting the weight of the destruction settle over the assembly like a physical burden. We have exhausted our fleets. We have exhausted our science. We have burned the reserves of the great energy spires, and yet the darkness advances. It moves with a hunger that suggests sentience, yet it offers no communication, no terms, no quarter. Across the chamber, the holographic projection in the center of the room shifted, displaying a map of the known galaxy. A sprawling web of light representing the consensus territories was being eaten away at the edges by a creeping void, a stain of absolute nothingness that made the surrounding stars look frail and insignificant. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a dissonance of chittering, growling, and whispered prayers. Ambassador Xylia of the Aquarian Fluid Collectives shifted in her containment suit, the liquid inside bubbling with agitation. If the Cathar could not hold the line, her synthesized voice drifted through the translation matrix, soft but laced with terror, then there is no line to hold. They possess the greatest kinetic batteries in the known universe. If brute force failed, if energy projection failed. Then we are discussing the terms of our extinction, High Exarch. Why have you summoned us? To watch the end together, to compose a final elegy for a galaxy that will have no one left to hear it. Her fatalism was shared by many. The assembly was a portrait of defeat. Great empires, who had spent millennia arguing over trade routes and border disputes, now found themselves united only by the certainty of their demise. I summoned you, Thalos said, his mandibles clicking together with a sharp, percussive sound that cut through the murmurs, because there is one variable we have not yet accounted for, one anomaly in the calculations of our demise. He gestured with a sweeping motion of his primary limb toward the far end of the holographic map, to a region of space that was largely ignored by the consensus, a sparse, resource-poor arm of the galaxy known as the Sol Void. The humans. The word hung in the air, eliciting a mixture of scoffing dismissal and genuine confusion. Humanity was a young species, barely out of its cradle by the standards of the consensus. They were considered chaotic, short-lived, and technologically crude. They burned dirty fuels, they fought with projectile weapons that relied on chemical explosions, and their diplomacy was often seen as abrasive and lacking in nuance. They were tolerated because they occupied space no one else wanted, and because they produced art and music that some of the older races found quaintly emotional. But to invoke them in a war council against an existential threat seemed like a desperate joke. General Ractor of the warrior caste slammed a fist onto his console, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Humans, he barked high, his throat sac swelling with indignation. You speak of the primates, the scavengers. Exarch, the discordance eats stars. It unravels the fabric of reality. The humans are still struggling to master hyperlane stability without suffering temporal nausea. Their ships are welded together with hope and primitive alloys. What can they possibly offer us but more bodies for the fire? Ractor's disdain was palpable, a thick sludge of arrogance that had not yet been burned away by fear. To him, strength was measured in the yield of plasma torpedoes and the density of hull plating, areas in which humanity was laughably deficient. They are children playing with sparks while the forest burns. Thalos did not recoil from the outburst. He waited, his compound eyes fixed on the general until Ractor sat back down, grumbling. They are children, Thalos agreed, his voice dropping lower, but they are children who survived the long dark. We forget in our comfort that while the consensus basked in the light of the core worlds, humanity evolved on a death world, and then expanded into a sector of space filled with anomalies that would drive a logic engine to madness. They do not survive by overpowering their environment, General. They survive by enduring it, and they have sent a message. The High Exarch tapped a command into his console, and the holographic map zoomed in on the human sector. A single pulsing beacon appeared. They claim to have a solution, not a weapon, not a shield, but a path. They have requested an audience not to beg for aid, but to offer it. They call it the Protocol of the Forgotten. The doors to the great chamber groaned, the sound of ancient gears grinding against the silence that followed Thalos's declaration. The heavy blast doors, designed to withstand orbital bombardment, parted slowly, revealing the corridor beyond. Standing there was not a delegation of warriors in power armor, nor a conclave of scientists in pristine robes. It was a small group, perhaps a dozen individuals, clad in simple, utilitarian gray uniforms that bore no insignias of rank, only a small patch on the shoulder depicting a golden stylistic flame. They walked without the rhythmic marching of soldiers, but with a loose, predatory grace, their eyes scanning the room not with awe, but with a calculating assessment. Leading them was a woman of advanced years, her hair the color of steel wool, her face a topographical map of deep lines and weathered skin. She carried no weapon, only a simple datapad held loosely at her side. This was Admiral Elena Vance, a name that appeared in the footnotes of consensus intelligence reports as a retiring naval officer, a relic of a bygone human conflict. She approached the center of the room, her boots clicking softly on the crystalline floor. The alien delegates watched her with a mix of curiosity and pity. She looked so fragile. A biological ephemeral, her lifespan a mere blink compared to the centuries-old beings surrounding her. She stopped before the dais of the High Exarch, looking up at the towering insectoid with an expression that was terrifyingly calm. She did not bow. She did not perform the rites of submission. She simply nodded, a gesture of equal acknowledging equal. "High Exarch," she said, her voice raspy but clear, amplified by the room's acoustics. "Members of the consensus, you are afraid." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the clinical detachment of a doctor diagnosing a terminal illness. "We are realistic, Admiral Vance," Thalos replied, his tone diplomatic but edged with impatience. "We are facing the end of days. We invited you here because you claim to have a solution, though I confess, looking at your capabilities, I struggle to see what humanity can offer that the elder races cannot." Vance smiled, a dry, humorless twitch of the lips. "That is because you look at the galaxy as a place of resources and energy," she said, pacing slowly in a small circle, addressing the room at large. "You see stars as batteries, you see planets as habitats, you see space as a distance to be crossed. When the discordance arrived, you threw energy at it, you threw mass at it. You tried to build walls against the dark, but you cannot kill a shadow by shooting it, and you cannot wall out the cold." She stopped and tapped her datapad. The hologram changed. The map of the galaxy disappeared, replaced by a wireframe schematic of a ship. But it was unlike any ship the consensus had ever built. It was ugly. It was a blocky, asymmetrical monstrosity, a jagged spear of metal and ceramic, bristling with antennas and radiator fins. It looked like a piece of industrial debris that had been given engines. It lacked the elegant curves of Aquarian ships, or the geometric perfection of the Cathar dreadnoughts. "This," Vance said, gesturing to the ugly schematic, "is the silent vow. You won't find it in your databases. You won't find it in our current fleet reg. Istries, it was built 300 years ago during the unification wars of Earth, before we even had reliable FTL. It was a colony ship, technically, but it was never launched." "A colony ship," General Ractor scoffed, standing up again. "You bring us a drawing of an antique transport. This is your salvation, a rusted bus." "Sit down, General," Vance said, her voice snapping like a whip. The sudden command froze the general. No human had ever dared order a member of the warrior caste. It was never launched because it wasn't finished. It was abandoned in the gravity well of a brown dwarf on the edge of our system because the project was deemed insane, too costly, too dangerous, and ultimately unnecessary because the war ended. But the hull remains, and what is inside it remains. She looked back at Thalos. You asked what we have that you don't. We have a history of losing High Exarch. We have a history of being pushed to the brink of extinction, not by aliens, but by ourselves. And because of that, we became hoarders. We don't throw things away. We bury them. We hide them. We prepare for the day when the logic of peace fails and only the logic of survival remains. And what logic is that? Asked Xylia, her liquid form swirling with intrigue. Logic of the Pyrrhic victory, Vance said softly. The silent vow contains a singularity drive, not the stabilized, safe cores your ships use. It houses a naked singularity constrained by magnetic fields that are barely sufficient. It was designed to do one thing: to anchor reality, to create a gravity well so profound that it acts as a dam in the river of spacetime. The discordance. It moves by consuming the path of least resistance. It flows. We believe we can create a breakwater. Thalos leaned forward, his faceted eyes glittering. A naked singularity? That is forbidden technology. It is uncontrollable. If that containment fails, it would not just stop the discordance. It would consume the sector. It would kill billions. Yes, Vance said, unflinching. It might, but the discordance will kill everyone. We are offering a gamble, a coin toss. We have retrofitted the silent vow. We have awakened its systems, but we cannot pilot it alone. It requires energy to jumpstart the magnetic containment to a level that can withstand the proximity of the discordance. We need your fleet, not to fight, but to push. We need you to act as the battery for our ignition. You have the power, we have the trigger. The room descended into chaos. Arguments erupted in a dozen languages. It was madness, suicide, a human delusion born of desperation. The delegates shouted and gestured, their fear turning into anger at the audacity of the proposal. But Vance stood silent in the center of the storm, watching them. She waited for the wave to crest and break. She knew something they didn't. She knew that desperate creatures eventually stopped looking for the perfect solution and started looking for any solution. Thalos raised a hand, demanding silence. It took minutes for the roar to subside. "Admiral," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries, "you ask us to accompany you to a dead ship, to pour our remaining reserves into a primitive device that might kill us all in the hope that it stops an unstoppable force. Why should we trust you? Why should we trust humanity?" Vance looked at him, and for a moment her eyes shimmered with a profound sadness. "Because, High Exarch, you are fighting to save your empire. You are fighting for your palaces, your trade routes, your legacy. We are fighting because we have nowhere else to go. The silent vow was built by people who thought the world was ending. It is a monument to stubbornness. And right now, stubbornness is the only resource the galaxy has left in abundance." The decision was not made quickly, but it was made. The logic of the consensus, usually so rigid, buckled under the pressure of the inevitable. The fleet would mobilize. They would follow the humans to the coordinates of the silent vow. The journey to the coordinates was a procession of ghosts. The consensus fleet, a glittering armada of sleek, majestic vessels, moved in formation, their engines tracing lines of fire across the void. In their midst, leading the way, was the human flagship, the UNS Dauntless. Compared to the alien behemoths, it was blocky and utilitarian, scarred by micrometeoroids and the harsh radiation of the outer rim. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the atmosphere was quiet, disciplined. The human crew worked with efficient minimalism. There were no grand speeches, no weeping. They were professionals. Admiral Vance stood at the tactical plot, watching the sensor readings of the alien fleet trailing them. "They're nervous," remarked Captain Halloway, her executive officer. He was a younger man, sharp-featured, his eyes glued to the proximity sensors. "The Cathar ships have their weapon ports open. They don't trust us." "They shouldn't," Vance muttered, zooming in on the destination ahead. "We're leading them into a graveyard." The destination was a region of space known as the Tenebrous Drift. It was a celestial junkyard, a nebula choked with dust and ionized gas, creating a sensor shadow that hid everything within. It was the kind of place smugglers and pirates avoided, not because of patrols, but because navigation was a nightmare. As the fleet entered the cloud, visibility dropped to zero. Sensors became a static-filled mess. The alien captains hailed the Dauntless repeatedly, demanding updates, their voices rising in pitch with every kilometer deeper into the fog. Vance answered them with calm, repetitive coordinates. Trust the path. Maintain formation. And then they broke through. The center of the Tenebrous Drift was a clear pocket of space, a calm eye in the storm of gas. And there, floating in the dark, was the silent vow. The hologram in the council chamber had not done it justice. The ship was titanic. It was a city of steel, kilometers long, shaped like a great, jagged spine. It was dark, no running lights, no engine glow. It hung in the void like a sleeping god, ancient and terrible. Its hull was pitted and gray, looking more like an asteroid than a construct. Cables the width of skyscrapers trailed from its underside, drifting in the vacuum. It radiated a sense of heaviness, a density that the sensors registered immediately. "By the core," whispered the comms officer on the Dauntless. "I thought it was a myth. I thought the vow was just a story they told cadets." "It's real," Vance said. "Signal the fleet. Tell them to assume injection formation. We don't have much time." The consensus fleet slowed, their beautiful, glowing hulls casting strange reflections on the dead metal of the human ship. The contrast was stark, the peak of alien aesthetic and technology hovering next to the brutalist industrialism of humanity's past. High Exarch Thalos hailed Vance. His holographic visage appeared on the bridge, his mandibles twitching. "Admiral, this structure, it radiates hard radiation. The core is leaking. It is unstable." "It's not leaking, Exarch," Vance corrected. "It's breathing. The singularity is active, just dormant. We need to wake it up fully. Align your energy projectors with the collection spires on the dorsal ridge. We will initiate the handshake." The process was agonizingly slow. The alien ships maneuvered into position, linking their energy outputs to the ancient receptors of the silent vow. Beams of pure plasma, ion streams, and coherent light bridged the gap, pouring into the human ship. For a long time, nothing happened. The energy seemed to vanish into the dull metal, swallowed by the darkness of the hull. The tension on the bridge of the Dauntless was physical. If the couplings failed, the feedback would vaporize them all. Then a vibration. It wasn't sound. There is no sound in space. But the sensors picked up the harmonic resonance of the hull, a low-frequency thrum that rattled the teeth of everyone in the fleet. Lights began to flicker on along the spine of the silent vow, not the clean, blue LEDs of the modern fleet, but harsh, yellow, industrial floods. They clicked on in sequence, running down the length of the ship, illuminating vast trenches of machinery, gears the size of cities, and heat sinks glowing cherry red. "Energy transfer at 40%, Holloway called out. "The singularity containment field is stabilizing, but Admiral," the discordance. "Long-range sensors show it just entered the system." "On screen," Vance ordered. The main view screen shifted. Behind them, at the edge of the tenebrous drift, the stars were disappearing. A wall of absolute blackness was eating the nebula. It moved faster than before, as if it sensed the activation of the silent vow. It was hungry. The discordance wasn't just a void, it was a chaotic storm of anti-reality. Where it touched matter, matter ceased to be. There was no explosion, just deletion. "Accelerate the transfer," Vance shouted, her calm veneer cracking for the first time. "Thalos, give us everything. Drain your shields if you have to." "If we drain our shields, the radiation from your ship will kill us," Thalos roared back. "If you don't, that thing will eat our souls. Do it." The alien fleet, driven by the primal fear of the encroaching dark, complied. The beams of energy intensified, turning blindingly white. The silent vow groaned. The debris around it began to move, pulled in by the sudden increase in gravity. The ship was waking up, and it was angry. Inside the silent vow, automated systems that hadn't cycled in 3 centuries screamed to life. Dust was blown out of vents. Coolant flooded dry pipes. And deep in the heart of the ship, the singularity, a microscopic black hole, began to spin. "Connection established," Holloway yelled over the alarms. "The vow is under its own power, containment holding at 98%. Wait, Admiral, the NavComp. Uter on the vow. It's locking onto a target." "Targeting the discordance?" Vance asked. "No, ma'am, it's targeting the fleet, our fleet." Vance froze. "What?" "The gravity well, it's not a shield, it's a tether. Admiral, the ship isn't designed to push the enemy back, it's designed to pull us in." Before Vance could respond, the silent vow fired. But it didn't fire a weapon, it pulsed. A wave of gravitational distortion erupted from the ship, rippling through space like a tsunami in a pond. It hit the consensus fleet and the Dauntless. The inertial dampeners shrieked as the artificial gravity failed. The universe outside the windows twisted. Light bent into circles, the stars smeared into streaks. They weren't being destroyed, they were being dragged. The silent vow, fueled by the desperate energy of 1,000 worlds, had created a tunnel through space-time, a rough, violent tear in the fabric of the universe. and it was dragging the entire fleet into it, away from the discordance, away from the tenebrous drift and into the unknown. Consciousness returned slowly to Admiral Vance. It came with the taste of copper and the throbbing ache of a body subjected to G-forces that biology was never meant to endure. She was on the floor of the bridge. The emergency lighting was bathing the room in a bloody red glow. Around her, the crew was stirring, groaning, checking limbs. She pulled herself up to the tactical console. "Report," she croaked. Her voice sounded thin, distant. Holloway was already at his station, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "We're alive. Hull integrity is compromised on decks 4 through 10, but we're holding pressure." He looked at the sensor readings and stopped. His hands hovered over the keys, trembling. "Where are we, Holloway?" I don't know the stars. They're wrong." Vance stumbled to the main viewport. The blast shields retracted. They were not in the tenebrous drift. They were not anywhere near the Sol void. The space outside was a dense, glowing purple nebula filled with electrical storms that spanned light years, and floating in the distance, filling the sky, was a structure. It was a megastructure, a ringworld but broken, shattered into massive arcs that orbited a central, pulsating white star. It was ancient, overgrown with what looked like biomechanical flora, and surrounding it were ships. Thousands of them, not consensus ships, not discordance. These were sleek silver needles drifting in silent patrols. "Exarch Thalos is hailing us," the comms officer said, voice shaking. "He demands an explanation, he says. He says the silent vow is transmitting." "Put it on speakers," Vance ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was not human. It was digital, fragmented, synthesized from a recording made centuries ago. It was the voice of the silent vow's original architect, a man dead for 300 years. "This is Architect Wren. If you are hearing this, then the protocol was successful. You have not defeated the enemy. You cannot defeat the enemy. The discordance is not a plague. It is a harvesting mechanism. It is the immune system of the universe, cleaning up civilizations that grow too loud, too fast. We learned this too late. We built the vow not to fight, but to hide, to punch a hole into the eye of the storm. You are now in the deep layer." A pocket dimension folded within the event horizon of the galactic core. "The discordance cannot see you here. You are safe. But you are also exiled. Welcome to the sanctuary of the forgotten. Welcome home." The message clicked off. Silence reigned on the bridge. Vance looked out at the shattered ringworld, at the silver ships that were now turning toward them. Likely the automated guardians of this sanctuary, or perhaps the remnants of other civilizations that had fled here eons ago. Thalos's face appeared on the screen. He looked smaller, shaken. The arrogance was gone. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound confusion. "Admiral, did you know?" "No," Vance whispered, staring at the alien sky. "I thought it was a weapon. I thought we were going to die fighting." "We are alive," Thalos said, testing the word as if it were foreign. "But we are trapped, cut off from our worlds, our people." "Our people are gone, Exarch," Vance said, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. "If the discordance is what the recording says, then the galaxy we left is already being scrubbed clean. We are what's left. The consensus. Humanity, all of us here, we are the repository of galactic history now." She looked at the silent vow drifting alongside them. The ugly, blocky ship had burned out its singularity drive. It was dead metal now. It had fulfilled its purpose. It had been forgotten, mocked, and underestimated, and it had done exactly what humanity always did. It changed the rules of the game when the game became unwinnable. "We have work to do," Vance said, her voice strang. Thenning the steel returning to her spine, she looked at her crew, then at the alien Exarch. "We need to establish contact with whoever lives on that ring. We need to assess resources. We need to form a governing council, a real one, not based on territory or energy credits, but on survival." "You assume command?" Thalos asked, arching in brow ridge. "No," Vance said. "I assume nothing, but look at your ships, Thalos, look at mine. We are damaged, leaking, and tired, but we are here. The humans built the door, you provided the key. We walked through it together. There are no more Cathar or Aquarians or humans here. There are just the survivors." The view screen showed the silver ships approaching. They were hailing. The universal greeting code, mathematics, prime numbers, a sign of intelligence, of curiosity. Vance took a breath. "Open a channel, let's introduce ourselves." The camera pulled back through the hull of the Dauntless, past the drifting hulk of the Silent Vow, past the bewildered alien armada, rising higher and higher into the purple haze of the pocket dimension. The galaxy outside was gone, silenced by the discordance. But here, in the hidden fold of reality, a spark remained. A fragile, confused, terrified spark of life. The forgotten ship had not saved the galaxy, it had saved the future. And in the silence of the deep layer, the first negotiations of a new alliance began, not with threats of war, but with the shared, quiet understanding of those who had looked into the abyss and found a way to blink first. The long dark was over, the long light had just begun. The transition from the initial shock of survival to the reality of their new existence was not instantaneous. It was a slow, grinding process, much like the tectonic plates of a planet settling after a massive quake. Days turned into weeks in the deep layer, though days were a relative term here. The central white star, which the scientists named the Hearth, did not rise or set. It simply pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic luminosity that dictated the sleep cycles of the fleet. The silver ships that had approached them were indeed drones, caretakers of the shattered ringworld. They guided the ragged fleet of the consensus and the human contingent into a high orbit around one of the larger, intact segments of the megastructure. This segment, a landmass the size of a continent, was covered in verdant overgrowth, ruins of a civilization so old that the stone had turned back into geology. It was here in the shadow of these ruins that the true friction began. The consensus was an organization built on hierarchy, on the established order of millennia. Even in exile, old habits died hard. The Cathar wanted to seize the orbital defense platforms the drones controlled. The Aquarians wanted to strip mine the asteroids in the system for water. They looked to High Exarch Thalos for permission, for direction, trying to rebuild the comfortable bureaucracy they had lost. But Thalos was changed. He spent hours on the observation deck of his flagship, staring at the silent vow. The human ship was being towed into a graveyard orbit, its job done, its hull cooling. Thalos was haunted by it, the sheer inelegance of it, the brutality, and the effectiveness. He summoned Admiral Vance to his ship, the resplendent spire. This time there was no grand council chamber. They met in his private sanctum, a room of soft light and flowing water. Vance arrived alone, wearing her same gray uniform, now patched and cleaned. She looked tired. The weight of being the de facto leader of the human remnant was pressing down on her. "Admiral," Thalos said, gesturing to a seat designed for human physiology, a crate with a cushion on it, a small concession that spoke volumes. "My engineers have been analyzing the data logs from your ship, the silent vow." And Vance sat, resting her hands on her knees. "The mathematics involved in the singularity drive. They are incorrect," Thalos said, his voice troubled. "By our understanding of physics, the drive should have collapsed instantly. The magnetic fields were too weak. The energy injection was too chaotic. It should have failed." "But it didn't," Vance said. "No, it didn't, and I need to know why. Science does not care for luck, Admiral. There is a variable we are missing." Vance sighed, looking out the viewport at the ringworld below. "It wasn't luck, Thalos. It was the operator. The vow wasn't run by an AI. It was run by a neural link, a ghost-in-the-machine protocol. We didn't just wake up the ship's computer. We woke up the imprint of the architect, Ren. He held the field together. He manually adjusted the containment parameters in nanoseconds, reacting faster than a logic gate because he wasn't using logic. He was using intuition." Thalos clicked his mandibles slowly. "You enslaved a consciousness." "No, he volunteered. 300 years ago. He uploaded his mind knowing he'd would sleep until the end of the world. It was his sacrifice." She looked Thalos in the eye. "That's the variable you're missing. The consensus builds technology to remove the user from the danger. Safer, more efficient. Humans. We build technology that requires us to bleed for it to work. We are the catalyst." Thalos was silent for a long time. "This philosophy, it is terrifying. It implies that your technology is not a tool but a partner, a symbiotic parasite." "It implies that we don't trust the universe to be kind," Vance countered. "And we were right." Their conversation was interrupted by a priority alert, General Ractor. His face appeared on the wall screen, distorted by static. He was on the surface of the ringworld, leading a ground expedition. "Exarch Admiral," Ractor roared, the background noise filled with the screeching of metal. "We have found something, the ruins. They are not empty." "Define not empty," Vance said, leaning forward. "We breached a data vault in the central spire of the sector. It woke up. Automations are engaging us, but they aren't shooting to kill, they are hurting us, and, by the void, they are speaking." Speaking what language? Thalos asked. All of them, Ractor shouted, ducking as a beam of blue light sliced the air behind him. Simultaneously, they are broadcasting a welcome message. They say they have been waiting for the builders to return. They think we are them. Vance and Thalos exchanged a look. The implications were immediate and staggering. Pull your men back, Ractor, Vance ordered. Don't fire unless fired upon. If they think we're the returning landlords, let's not convince them we're burglars. I take orders from the Exarch, Ractor snarled. Do as she says, General, Thalos said quietly. We are guests here for now. The revelation that the Ringworld, this sanctuary, was waiting for its creators added a new layer of complexity to their survival. Who were the builders? Were they the ones who sent the discordance, or were they victims of it like the consensus? The answer lay in the data vault Ractor had found. A joint team was assembled. This time it wasn't just warriors and diplomats, it was scientists, engineers, and historians. Humanity sent Dr. Aris Thorne, a xenoarchaeologist who had spent his life studying the dead civilizations of the Sol Void. He was a small, nervous man, dwarfed by the Cathar shock troopers and the Aquarian fluid suits. They descended to the surface. The Ringworld was a paradise of forgotten engineering. Trees with leaves of photovoltaic glass grew from soil rich in nanites. Rivers flowed uphill, driven by gravity pumps that still hummed after eons. The data vault was a massive pyramid of white stone, seamless and imposing. The drones that had harassed Ractor were hovering near the entrance, spider-like machines of chrome and light. As the delegation approached, the drones parted, bowing their sensor heads. They recognized the energy signature, Dr. Thorne whispered, scanning the drones with his handheld device. Not of us, of the silent vow, the residue of the singularity drive. It matches the background radiation of this place. The vow. It didn't just open a door, it used a key that was compatible with this lock. Are you saying, Thalos asked, walking beside the human scientist, that humans built this place? No, Thorne said, shaking his head. Impossible. We were banging rocks together when this was built, but maybe the people who built this, maybe they visited Earth, or maybe physics only has one ultimate answer to the end of the world, and we stumbled upon the same answer they did. Convergent evolution of technology. They entered the vault. The interior was a library of light. Columns of holographic data stretched up into the darkness. It was a repository of 1 trillion souls, the history of a civilization that spanned galaxies, and in the center, a single interface console. Thorne stepped up to it. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the surface. If I touch this, it might trigger a defense protocol. Or it might tell us how to survive, Vance said from the comms link. Do it, Doctor. Thorne placed his hand on the console. The room exploded into light, not blinding but illuminating. Images flooded the minds of everyone in the room, not on screens but directly into their neural cortices. They saw the history of the builders. They were not one species. They were a coalition, a consensus of their own. They looked different energy beings, silicon giants, carbon-based bipeds. They had faced the discordance millions of years ago. They fought. They lost. And then they built the sanctuaries. 7 of them, hidden in the folds of space-time. But the vision didn't end there. It showed the origin of the discordance. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a natural disaster. The discordance was a message. The realization hit Thalos so hard he staggered physically. The images show the discordance as a misunderstood attempt at communication from a universe above theirs. A higher dimension trying to interface with the lower. But the interface was too powerful. It was like trying to download the internet into an abacus. The data density was so high it erased the physical matter it touched. It's not eating us, Thorne whispered, tears streaming down his face as the vision faded. It's trying to talk to us, and its voice is so loud it burns the paper it's written on. The silence that followed was profound. The enemy wasn't evil, it was simply vast. The destruction of their galaxy was a cosmic accident, a side effect of a handshake from godlike entities. So, General Ractor grunted, lowering his weapon. We are hiding from a hello. We are hiding from a shout, Thalos corrected, his voice filled with awe. And we are the only ones left who know the truth. The discovery changed everything. The fear that had driven the consensus turned into a solemn duty. They were no longer just refugees. They were the keepers of the truth. They possessed the knowledge of what the discordance was. Back on the resplendent spire, the mood had shifted from desperation to grim determination. The human problem was no longer a debate. Humanity had proven to be the essential catalyst. They had the audacity to build the silent vow, the intuition to navigate the breach, and the curiosity to unlock the vault. Thalos stood before the assembled representatives of the fleet, now a permanent council of the sanctuary. "We cannot go back," he said. "Our galaxy is being overwritten, but we are safe here. We have the resources of the Ringworld, we have the fleet, and we have a new purpose." He looked at Admiral Vance. "The builders left 7 sanctuaries. This is only one. If the discordance is a message, perhaps there is a way to answer it without being destroyed. Perhaps if we link the sanctuaries, we can build a receiver strong enough to take the signal." Vance smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "You're talking about a project that will take generations, centuries, maybe millennia." "We have time," Thalos said. "We have eternity." "Then we better get started," Vance said. The alliance that formed that day was not one of convenience, but of destiny. The boundaries between species began to blur. Technology was shared. Cultures merged. The Cathar taught the humans how to forge hull plating that could withstand the pressure of stars. The humans taught the Aquarians the concept of jazz and the stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. The consensus dissolved, replaced by the coalition of the deep. And drifting in the dark, watching over them like a silent grandfather, was the silent vow. It would never fly again. It was stripped for parts. Its hull used to build the foundations of the first great city on the Ringworld. But its core remained, a shrine to the moment when humanity stood before the apocalypse and refused to blink. Years passed, then decades. The survivors adapted. They had children. The children grew up hearing stories of the old galaxy, of the blue skies of Earth and the crystal spires of Ethon. But they also heard the story of the voyage, of the ship that was forgotten. One evening, 50 years after the arrival, Admiral Vance, now an old woman, frail and bound to a grav chair, sat on a balcony overlooking the new city. It was a chaotic, beautiful mess of alien architecture and human ingenuity. High Exarch Thalos, his carapace graying with age, stood beside her. "The sensor array is complete," Thalos said softly. "We have detected a signal from the second sanctuary. It is faint, but it is there." "They survived too?" Vance asked, her voice a whisper. "It appears the builder's failsafe was robust. We are not alone in the dark, Elena." Vance nodded, closing her eyes. She listened to the hum of the city below, the sound of life. "Good," she said. "That's good." "You saved us," Thalos said. "You and your ugly ship." "We just didn't want to die, Thalos. That's all it ever was." "Perhaps," the alien mused. "But in your refusal to die, you taught us how to live." Vance passed away quietly that night. Her funeral was attended by representatives of 20 species. There were no speeches about war, only about the path she had opened. They launched her body into the central star, the hearth, returning her to the light that sustained them all. And deep in the databanks of the city, a new file was created. A message, written in the combined language of the coalition, encoded into a pulse that would be fired into the layers of slipspace, aiming for the other sanctuaries. It began, "This is the coalition of the deep. We are the survivors of the discordance. We are the children of the silent vow. We are here. We are listening. And one day we will answer." The message shot out into the void, a beacon of defiance and hope. The galaxy outside might be gone, washed away by the cosmic tide, but in the pockets of reality, life held on. Stubborn, illogical, beautiful life. The ship was forgotten for centuries, but the people it saved would be remembered forever. They were the seed from which a new universe would grow. And as the lights of the Ringworld twinkled in the eternal twilight of the deep layer, the universe, in its own way, seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what the children of Saul would do next. Because if there was one constant in all of existence, it was this. You can break a human ship, you can burn a human world, but you can never ever break a human promise. The silent vow had been kept.